Hey, welcome back for another episode of Transform Your Workplace. I'm your host, Brandon Laws, and I've got two special guests with me today for this episode. I've got Deb Bridges, a health and safety consultant at Safety Northwest, and Xenium's own Emily Etherington. She's an HR business partner at Xenium. Welcome both. Good to have you here.
Thank you.
Thanks, Brandon. Thanks for asking us to join.
Glad to be here.
So, it's interesting, like for today, I wanted to talk about safety at work. And all the years that we've had this podcast, I don't know if we've ever had an episode dedicated to safety. We might have talked about safety in various ways on the episode, but this is all about safety at work. And specifically as we enter summertime, I think there's a lot more implications like heat stroke and wildfire and power outages that we've got to worry about as employers. So we're going to get into it. Let's just first, I want to talk about both of you and your roles. Deb, let's start with you a little bit. Who do you primarily serve? What does your day-to-day look like as a safety consultant?
Yeah, thanks, Brandon. We actually at Safety Northwest, we serve a lot of different clients, everything from construction, which is sometimes when I think people talk about safety in general, like that's the real visible, oh yeah, construction workers, I keep those folks safe, but also a lot of general industry businesses. I mean, we work with automotive dealerships, we work with warehousing, we work with manufacturing. We even do some, production, like cannabis production. We have some clients in there as well. So kind of the whole, I think I like to say we do virtually every business, not as much in healthcare, but almost everything else, we will definitely be out there. And my day-to-day life, I mean, I will spend, it can be really varied. I might start in the morning on construction sites and in the afternoon at, some warehouse or some big production facility. So yeah, it's pretty varied. It's really fun. I enjoy it.
With the clients that you're working with, do they tend to have their own safety people or safety resources, or is that built into some of those roles? And how often are you sort of wrapping around those people versus I am the safety manager for this company?
Yep. It really depends. I mean, our goal as a company is always to figure out what a business needs and then take them wherever they want to go. So sometimes if they're smaller businesses, they don't have a safety professional on staff. So we're kind of, we can't really serve in that role, but we can definitely assist whoever is serving in that role. We oftentimes partner with HR, obviously, with our partnership with Xenium, because oftentimes safety kind of ends up in the same realm as HR. Or I have a lot of HR managers who are like, I'm doing safety too. Can someone please help me? Because that's not what I was trained for. Some bigger organizations were providing more support. So it really just depends.
Yeah, that's a good segue into Emily. So Emily, in your role as an HR business partner, maybe talk about your role in particular and then how safety might come up and what you're doing about it.
Yeah, thanks, Brandon. In my current role, I work with clients across a lot of different industries as well. So a lot of nonprofits, a lot of manufacturing and industrial clients working primarily in office backgrounds. And so, as you can imagine, they all have very varied needs in terms of safety. And in my background, I took care of, my background is managing occupational safety programs, managing and facilitating safety committees in a retail or grocery environment, and then in an industrial environment where there's a lot more to consider. So it's all about just fitting your safety program to your needs. And for me, it was really easy for me to get passionate around safety and adopt a safety mindset that is just not just meeting compliance, not just meeting the minimums and checking all the boxes, but really creating a program where you can generate buy-in across the organization and work together as a team to ensure that your folks coming into your organization are leaving at the end of the day in as good or better shape than when they left. And we're protecting that quality of life and that earning potential of each individual in any environment.
Emily, you hit on something there that I think is really important in this conversation is safety needs to be really ingrained and bought in the company culture. And I don't know if either of you, Deb or Emily, if you've really tried to help leadership along with trying to make it a core piece of, it probably varies across industry, but how do you make that core to where it's important for every level, essentially?
You said it so well. I oftentimes hear, and I'm sure you've heard it as well, Emily, is people will say, I don't have time for safety. It's too time consuming. We don't have time, and oftentimes we can definitely go at it from the financial piece, and we can look at the costs of having people get hurt. Like, and I'm just talking about not the personal costs of someone getting hurt, but actual financial costs. And then let's talk about the personal costs. And then let's talk about the implication that that has for every single other individual who works for you, because someone getting hurt at work affects everyone. And then people will say, well, if I work safely, then, it's going to slow down production. Well, there's all kinds of statistics about how when people feel safe, which equals they feel included, they feel valued, they feel respected, that increases their buy-in, it increases their production, and it increases the likelihood that they're going to stay. People quit people, but I've heard organizations say that if it's a safe and valuable place and an employee feels valued, they don't jump for $1. They don't jump for more money. I'm sure, Emily, you've heard and experienced something similar.
Yeah, I think that it's easy to understand that keeping your people safe is the right thing to do, and do the right thing is a core value that we can easily wrap around. But the truth is, we have competing priorities. We have a limited amount of hours in the day to meet the production requirements, or we have to accomplish all these other tasks, accountabilities, and KPIs. And especially in a smaller organization, that's super challenging if you don't have the budget or the resources to really have one person or a team dedicated to safety. But, even if we're just meeting these OSHA requirements, almost every organization has a safety committee, a safety meeting. And I think so what's key there is really understanding that it has to be a team of people, and we have to generate that buy-in from the very top down. And the way to do that is oftentimes really tied to what you've described, is how does this benefit us? How does achieving safety goals and prioritizing safety contribute to all of these other things that we need to do, like retain good people and protect ourselves from risk and liability and cost related to safety and injury, and really just operating. When you focus on safety, you tighten up the organization overall, and you bring into focus other things that are going to benefit your company. So yeah, it's got to be a mix of the value and the bottom line. It's got to be a mix of incorporating that into our core values and in our common and shared language, as well as understanding and demonstrating how that benefits our bottom line and our business objectives.
The two go hand in hand for sure.
Yeah, that's well said, Emily. So let's say the people listening here, they're bought into safety. They're ready to start taking some preventative measures. And as I kind of preface this entire conversation, we're entering summer. And I remember a few years ago, we're all in Oregon. And I remember a few years ago, we had some crazy wildfires that caused a lot of smoke. It made for not only possibility of heat stroke, there's smoke, which is terrible for the lungs, and just like not a good work environment for a lot of organizations. And I think there's certain things employers could do in a preventative measure. And now that I have you, Deb, as a safety consultant, and Emily, you've worked with a lot of employers and have both consulted at an HR level, but also at a safety level. I think there's some things that we can offer people in this podcast. So let's get into this. So heat stroke, I want to start with this. We're entering summer. Environments, especially like warehouse type of environments, can get really hot. I recall I had a college job where I was in a warehouse working long hours, not very well insulated, super hot. If it was 100 degrees outside, it felt like it was 120. It felt like a sauna essentially. I don't know how you prevent heat stroke, or there's things you can do, the like shop floor, warehouse floor, to prevent some of these things. But maybe from a preventative standpoint, what would each of your approaches be with an environment like this?
Well, Oregon OSHA passed a heat standard, and it went into effect last year. And it basically requires employers to make sure that employees are trained on the signs and symptoms of heat illness. It also requires employers to do things at a couple trigger points. And one is feels like, or heat index of 80 degrees. The other one is a feels like, or heat index of 90 degrees. Now, so at 80 degrees, an employer has to provide shade and water, and they have to provide the heat standard was targeted or in response to fatalities that happened mostly in agriculture. So some of the things about the heat standard are really targeted towards people who are working outside. So that's why at 80 degrees, it's shade and water. And it's enough water for employees to drink 32 ounces of water per hour if they wish to, which is a lot of water. And again, previously, employers may not have been supplying any water, or it might have been sitting in the back of the pickup for, 30, 40 minutes, half a day, and it's hot. So it does have to be a particular temperature, which is just tepid or below. And they provide shade. And that's enough shade for employees to take a break, all of them, if they needed to. So the challenge can sometimes come from employers who are in situations like you described, Brandon. They're in a warehouse. Well, I already have shade, right? If I look at the heat index, which NIOSH has a great heat index app, it doesn't actually read the indoor temperature. It just tells you what the outdoor temperature is. So this is where it's important for employers to start having those conversations with employees and to talk not only about signs and symptoms of heat illness, but also, what do you need? Like, can we add more fans? Do we need to take more breaks? Do we have an air conditioned space for you to go to? And let's have this, the best way in any situation to come to a real conclusion or a solution where people are bought into it, especially when it comes to safety, is include your employees. Talk to them. They're the ones on the floor. They're the ones who are experiencing the sauna, as you described, Brandon. So what can we do? Sometimes it's, hey, we're gonna supply everybody with the Otter Pops. As many Otter Pops as you want, you can have Otter Pops. Hey, we're buying cooling towels for everybody, right? It's just small things like that that mean so much to people because, again, they're valued, they're respected, they're being heard, and their employer's taking care of them.
What's the how behind this? I mean, is HR getting involved in are they buying the Otter Pops and the water? Are they facilitating? Like, I'm sure you've dealt with something like this before.
Yeah. When I was, facilitating occupational safety, I was an HR department of one, so I was doing all that, and I was relying on really training my managers on what their responsibilities are under the Oregon heat laws that are, popping up everywhere now. And then working with my team to bring in these engineering controls that are going to help us with this. So heat stroke is like the more extreme end of heat illness. And that's what happens if we don't do any of these preventative things. And, some people are more susceptible to heat illness than others. So they can move straight to heat stroke and skip over the heat cramps and skip over the heat exhaustion. So you've got to train your managers to understand the symptoms and be able to see when their people are impacted and to talk to their people that are reporting to them about what that looks like. Get everybody looking out for each other. We don't want someone working somewhere alone in a hot environment. We need a buddy system. We need to train our team to look out for each other and to monitor each other for these symptoms. And then we want to apply preventative controls. We want to get in front of this and start building these habits. Not just, okay, it hit 80 degrees, so now we need to be thinking about this, or it hit 90 degrees and now we need to put out water and ice and take extra breaks in the shade. We want to build those habits into our daily routines for all summer long. So for example, in an industrial and warehouse environment where it's very hard to control the interior, or you're working around hot machines, or the ventilation in these big rooms can only do so much. It's about talking to your people every day. Hey, you guys don't forget to bring in your water bottles. We got an ice machine and brought in an ice machine so you can go take the scoop and dump ice into your water bottles and fill it up. We're providing the extra breaks. We do have an air conditioned break room. Here's what it looks like if you start feeling this way: dizzy, nauseous, sweating, these types of things. Watch out for each other. If you start slurring your words, or, your behavior's a little odd, that's potentially a symptom of, heat exhaustion or heat stroke. So we want to watch out for each other. And then it's the manager's job to go around and check in with folks and say, hey, did you get enough water today? Are you drinking water? It's extra hot, or we want to make sure you're okay. Don't forget to fill up with ice on your break, or take the extra break, stop production, or whatever it is in your environment that you can do. You've got to be going around doing that. The Otter Pops is a popular one. That's definitely one that we used and that people appreciated. is just a way to more quickly, that ice water and that ice otter pop, to reduce your core temperature more quickly. And so manager training, managers understanding their responsibilities of monitoring the indoor and outdoor temperature, what the bare minimums are, and what we actually want to do as an organization to get way in front of it and prevent it, and don't walk right up to that line before we start taking action.
I had talked earlier about how, Oregon, California had terrible wildfires a couple of years back. And I recall, just the smoke seeping into my home, inside the businesses. This seems like out of control in some respects. Like, how do you prevent this? As a non-safety person, I'm like, how do you keep business as usual while something like this drastic is happening? From a safety standpoint, how do you deal with wildfire smoke in a business environment?
Well, again, Oregon OSHA did pass a wildfire smoke standard, and a lot of it was in response to, was that 2020? Yeah, when basically the entire Cascade Range was on fire. And again, there are trigger points for employees, and it correlates with NIOSH's, or I think it's the EPA's air quality index chart, which is what Oregon OSHA is going to use. And again, it has trigger points that where employers are required to do something. And I'm sure we all remember sort of that scale. It's like a chart that we see when we bring up the air quality index. So once the AQI level reaches, I gotta make sure I have this right. Once it reaches, basically employers have to notify employees about the different AQIs, and then the employees should be monitoring it themselves as well. I think that's always a really good idea. So when our AQI is anywhere between up to 200, and I'm going to give you the color. So 200 is that orange category, so that there's the yellow and then the orange category. So 200 is the top of the orange category. So at that point, an employer has to provide N95 masks for their employees if they choose to wear them. If it gets over 200, so from 200 all the way up to 500, and 500 is that purpley one. So now if an employer is asking employees to work, they have to wear N95s. They have to. No doubt, no question. Everybody has to wear one. If we get over 500, now respirators are required. And respirators mean that's a whole nother bucket of things that we have to do as an employer. Employees have to be medically evaluated before they wear a respirator. Then they have to be, you have to do a fit test to make sure that the respirator seals properly, typically meaning that people have to be clean shaven. So typically at that point, that's a situation when an employer is going to be like, and we're going to close. It's not worth it, right? So the question I get a lot, and I'm sure you get this as well, Emily, is, okay, so I'm an employer, all my people work inside, what do I, occasionally they go outside. There is a time limit if employees are spending less than, I think, 15 or 20 minutes outside, then again, they don't have to wear a respirator, although I would recommend that they do. I think the other thing is education. It's really educating people about the harmful effects of wildfire smoke and the harmful effects of particulate smaller than 2.5 parts per million. It gets way down deep in the lungs. Obviously, some groups are more sensitive to wildfire smoke than others. But again, going back to my employers wondering if this pertains to them or not, if you have a mechanical filtration system that filters out wildfire smoke, then people inside should be fine. The key thing is your mechanical ventilation system working? When was the last time you changed the filters? Are the filters the right filters? So all of these things come into play. And again, as Emily mentioned earlier, let's get ahead of it now, right? Let's not wait. Let's get ahead of it. So that's kind of from the OSHA more regulatory standpoint. But
yeah, and Emily, from your standpoint, I imagine there's a lot of communication that needs to happen to the workforce about all of what Deb just said. What's HR's role, maybe in conjunction with leadership, about communicating all of these things?
Yeah, I lean towards encouraging leaders to be as transparent as possible. The law does a really good job of prioritizing human health. But, we got to communicate that out to folks, and we got to help people understand, especially if they're commuting to work and, they're in an environment where, they have to go in and out of the building. There's just so many variables to consider if you're not on the either end of the extreme. I'm outside all day, or I'm isolated in an office with a high functioning and efficient air filtration system all day. There's everything in between. And the more you can communicate to employees about the general aspects of the law and why it exists and how it impacts them in their role and what they have to do, and, the job that they're executing and the potential exposure that they have, the better. And then we need to listen to our employees in general. Deb mentioned that some people are more impacted by this than others. And some people are in, there's health conditions and different situations where someone could be more susceptible to risk and more impacted by wildfire smoke, even on their commute to work. So we need to be listening to employees and understanding their specific situations. And in a lot of cases, we need to go above and beyond what the law and the regulations expect of us to accommodate employees, whether it's under the ADA and the Adults with Disabilities Act, and they have a specific need for accommodation that's related to environmental exposure for such as working at home or additional air filters or masking much sooner, making masks available much sooner than at those higher levels of poor air quality, and just being open to those accommodations and those adjustments and being willing to do that is important. So high level of communication and transparency, specific and customized to the individual's role and potential exposure, and then just really listening to those folks that need the extra assist and the extra accommodation.
Let's talk about power outages. I don't know how frequent this happens in the work environment, but I'm sure it does happen. So whether it's weather or another factor, power outages happen. What are some potential safety hazards associated with that? What paths do employers take, and any contingency plans around work stoppages and things like that?
Yeah, I think we oftentimes, especially here in Portland, when we think of a power outage, we think of winter, and we think of the ice storm or snow or whatever. But I always, as we see our summers getting warmer and heat domes becoming more common, what can happen is the power grid can get a little bit overloaded, and we could get a brownout or a blackout or some sort of power outage at any time. And I think, this is a situation where, again, employers need to be prepared. What kind of facility am I running? What are my immediate hazards if I have a power outage? And what are my potential hazards if I have a power outage? Do I have what's my critical infrastructure? Do I have any critical pieces of equipment? And are they protected, or do they need to be protected from a power outage? Most of the time, this is something that an industry has already taken care of, particularly like hospitals, or if you've got machinery that needs to be running 24 hours a day, typically you're going to have some sort of generator. But let's say I work in a small restaurant, and I'm a small restaurant owner, or I'm a small business owner, and I have a power outage. Well, what do I do? What do I do with customers? Do employees know what to do with customers? Do we need to get out of the building? Do we stay in the building? What do we do with money? I know that's not a thing anymore, but we might have some money. Like what happens with all of these things? And I know some of our clients actually have a power outage kit, so it's something that their employees grab, and it's got a series of directions and things that they do, with processes, and again, thinking about customers, thinking about themselves, thinking about potentially money. So it's one of those that I think a lot of times we only think about it in the winter, but it's important to have that kit all the time. And again, it comes down to training. So identifying those potential hazards, training our employees, and giving them the tools and the support.
Yeah. And Emily, I imagine from your standpoint, because you care so much about the people, right? Like as HR, you're like almost have the compassion fatigue. I imagine people panic during these moments of like power outages or any incidents like this. So how do you, like, as an HR professional, keep people organized, calm, and executed on the plans that Deb is talking about?
Yeah. Power outage is one area where, if it's not planned for and trained for and rehearsed, just chaos ensues, and there's the immediate hazards like, okay, The power's out, the lights are out, I can't see. That's a hazard. People fumbling around in the dark, especially in like an office building or different areas where you don't have natural light. So, that's a consideration. And then there's all the secondary considerations, like the things we've talked about. Is my filtration system going to work? Is my air conditioner going to work? Do I have temperature controls and all the other things that we take for granted that make us comfortable and protect, human life and safety? So as Deb mentioned, it really is about having a plan and training frequently and repetitively on that plan, and having individuals assigned to be responsible for all of the things that we mentioned. Like there's a person who is assigned to know exactly where the flashlight is, and we check and make sure that flashlight has batteries on a regular basis, so that if the lights go out, the first thing we can do is provide safety through providing, shedding some light on the situation. And then it just goes on and on for there, not just for power outages, but for every situation.
Well, let's wrap up this discussion with maybe kind of summarizing all this, but specifically around like disaster preparedness, or even like incidents of violence that might come up. I don't know if those are two different approaches with how you would go about this, but like, how do employers prepare for disaster or emergencies? And what are some of those steps, those key components that you need in place before those things happen to prevent, or even just get people through those times? And either of you can jump in.
Yeah. Once again, it goes back to having a plan. First of all, developing a plan. Let's start with that. Let's develop our plan. Let's train to our plan, and then drill. Whenever I do training on disaster preparedness or even workplace violence, I always ask folks that are in the audience, I said, how many of you have been in the military or fire department or police? And I said, how many drills did you do? And they're just like, oh my God, all the time, right? As humans, that's the best way for us to prepare, because what happens in a disaster situation or workplace violence situation, or even a power outage, is that thinking, we sort of go into a little bit of that fight or flight, that thinking part of our brain kind of shuts off. And that is where the drills really come in. It's like it becomes automatic. We know what we're supposed to do. So I think identifying the potential disasters that can happen, and don't be complacent. Like, we could say, oh, tornadoes never happen in Portland. Well, they might, or workplace violence is a big one. Oh, that'll never happen at my workplace. It's important to recognize that it could happen. And as Emily has said a bunch of times, be transparent, have leadership involved, but identify, develop, plan, drill, train, like all of those things are going to be huge to make sure that people are able to be safe in that situation, whether it's a disaster or workplace violence.
Emily, from what Deb just said, like, I imagine like a lot of small companies that we're working with, medium sized, they don't have a lot of resources around this. So like, how do you recommend facilitating all of that and executing? Is it like a safety committee? Is it hiring a Deb and having a you by your side working together? Like, how do you effectively execute on this?
It's tough. You need to make this work meaningful. You need to make this work rewarding. You need to generate buy-in from the team that you're assigning to do this kind of work, to help them understand that, they are the heroes in this situation. They are the first responders. So I think in many cases, in order to achieve just putting together the plan and getting it developed, having your SOP, having your steps that you need to take in the event of XYZ all lined out and accessible so you can use that as a training document, I highly recommend partnering with Deb and Safety Northwest to get that done. But then that is not the end. It's not just create the document. It's then bring together the team, bring together the people that are going to execute this and be responsible for this. So every single location where you operate, where you allow people to enter a building or gather, you should have an emergency response plan, an ERP, and a team of people who know what the acronym ERP means. And some of those people are your ERCs. They're your emergency response coordinators. So for every emergency plan, you have at least 2 people on every shift, or at least 2 people that are normally present all of the time, who are your emergency response coordinators. And that team of people is trained on what these steps are. They don't have to memorize them, but if we do this training it'll kick in, or, we have it all listed out here and it's in a place where you can grab it if you're evacuating, or you can access it easily, not electronically. We're going to have power outage. We need printed physical documents that we can grab and reference and go over and execute on. So that emergency response coordinator is going to be responsible for coordinating this response to, and you want a list of things. Is it a power outage, an earthquake, a fire, a flood, some adverse weather conditions, a pandemic? And it gets worse from there, warfare, social unrest, or zombie apocalypse, like what do we do if these things happen? It could be facilities related, like a gas leak or something. So this person is going to know to call the right number to get, the fire department out there or the gas company out there. They're going to know where the valve is to shut off the gas. They're going to know a handful of things that they can do right away, including, initiate an evacuation of the building, or if it's shelter in place, where to gather everyone safely and have supplies on hand. And, there's just a lot of considerations for each thing. And steps 1 through 10 might be the same for 9 out of 10 of those. And then it varies, based on these other factors. So an emergency response plan that has all the variables that you need to consider for each type of emergency event, and then your emergency response coordinators. And train, repeat. Keep doing that and keep talking about why we're doing this. Why is this important? Hopefully we will never have to use this information. And like Deb said, like we can't memorize this stuff, but when we're faced with it, when it's in front of us, like I couldn't recite to you what I'm supposed to do with all the first aid training and all the AED training and all of that training that I've done over and over and over again. I couldn't tell you everything about that, but when it's in front of me and it's happening, I know what to do. That training kicks in. It comes back to me and I know how to react. And that's what's so important, is just generating the buy-in from the people that you put in charge, and then doing the training, not just once, not twice, but on a regular schedule and on a regular cadence. And bring in the trainers, bring in Deb, bring in Safety Northwest, make the plan, and bring in the trainers, and that will be super effective.
Yeah, great discussion. We kept it pretty high level for the most part, but I think the call to action here is if anybody's confused, we got 2 professionals right here on this podcast that you can reach out to. Deb, what's the best place that people can connect with you? We'll make sure to put links in show notes and blog posts.
Yeah, you can email me directly. It's Deb at Safety Northwest, all spelled out one word, .org, or you can go to our website, safetynorthwest.org.
Emily, what's the best way to connect with you?
Yeah, contact me at emily.etherington@xeniumhr.com. I believe that'll be on the information on this podcast, and then through the Xenium website at xeniumhr.com, we have a contact form as well.
My guests today have been Deb Bridges, the health and safety consultant at Safety Northwest, and Emily Etherington, an HR business partner at Xenium HR. Deb, Emily, thank you so much for coming on. Appreciate you.
Thanks, Brandon. This was really fun.
Thanks, Brandon. Great to see you.
Hey, thanks so much for tuning in for today's episode of Transform Your Workplace. The content on this show is strictly for general information and educational purposes only, so that you can go transform your workplace in a positive way. The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed on this show are the guest's own and don't represent the views, thoughts, and opinions of either Xenium HR, the sponsor of the show, or me, the host, Brandon Laws. Additionally, Xenium HR or myself, Brandon Laws, doesn't endorse any guest, their business, or any organization they represent, so discretion is advised. We encourage you to work with a trusted advisor to find a custom approach that fits your organization's needs. Thanks for tuning in to today's episode.